Hello, these slides have got some video recorded more than 40 years ago. Mostly I'm just going to let you read the slides rather than talk over them. Some of the slides are a bit wordy, and for those you might want to just pause the video if you want to read the slides. And it's going to be looking at image reconstruction, which just saw happening in the middle of the image here, and the anatomy of the ear and the eye. And the graph on the left is the way I visualize reconstruction, which maybe you'll be interested in, but you can make up your own mind about that. Thanks very much. Now we're going to look at some multiplanar images. What this means is that you, instead of just having one CT slice, you've got a whole series of CT slices stacked one on top of another to cover a complete volume. And you're going to explore them in 3 dimensions. The preserved human head was obtained by our colleague David King, who had been working with Godfrey for a year or 2 before I joined. He was an incredibly energetic and talented person, an English person, but when I knew him, he'd moved to the United States. And he provided the head, and I took the scans that you're about to see on the Topaz prototype, which is described in this slide. At the top left of this picture, you can see a 120mm zoomed view of 2 eyes with a nose at the top. And you can see 2 white lines across that. They're crosshairs. And the horizontal crosshair is shown below as a vertical view, and the vertical crosshair is shown on the right as a cross-section along that vertical line. And if you're a medic, you know which of those is sagittal and which is coronal. The view's now zoomed in further to 60mm, and in the top left you can see quite a lot of anatomical detail in the area behind the eye, where there's the optic nerve and various muscles that move the eye, and veins and arteries, and presumably nerves and other stuff which connect to the eye. And this is quite high spatial resolution, not far off current machines. The oblique view at the bottom right is being rotated in one angle to start with, and now it's got the second axis of rotation is aligned along the optic nerve. And rotating the second axis again exposes this anatomical detail in behind the eye. In 1980, the first video games were becoming available in places like pubs and arcades. Nobody had home computers in those days. And in the following video of exploring the inner ear, you can see us playing a game of trying to find the best view of the cochlea in the inner ear, which looks a bit like an ammonite on the left there. Trying to find the best view of that as quickly as possible. Memory may played tricks after 40 years, but I think I could probably do it faster than in this recording, but that's not important. Here you can see the structure of the inner ear, of one of the inner ears, zoomed to a 120mm field of view. And now it's zoomed to 60mm. And at the top left you can see the semicircular canals in cross-section, and here a transverse section through the semicircular canal, and the stapes. And now we've got the orthogonal views, sagittal and coronal, as well as transverse, as we had in the eye, and the oblique view is rotating and playing that game about find the cochlea as fast as possible. And you can see it being navigated in the appropriate views. And there's the result, the cochlea viewed looking really quite like an ammonite. Now we're going to have a little look under the bonnet at what's happening when a CT image is being reconstructed. And in this diagram at the bottom right, the CT scanner is measuring the total density along those coloured lines, and lots of other ones either side of those, in between those, and at other angles. But just look at the 5 lines there. In fact, just look at one of them. If you look at the red line, the red beam is going down diagonally across the image matrix. But you'll notice that it doesn't exactly hit any one of the image points bang center, and the little box on the left discusses that technicality. But the overall issue is that we've got to allocate the total density measured along that red line to the individual picture points which that red line interacts with. And the method to do that until 1973 was iterative, in which each loop around the iteration produces a more accurate answer than the previous one. And with experience, you know that you've got to stop in, say, after 2 or 3 iterations. Later in the 1970s, the filtered back projection was introduced, and that gives the answer in a single step. And the next few slides describe that in words, which you can read faster than I can speak. It's worth mentioning that these graphs show the sequence of events during the iterative method, and that it started with the view at 1 degree from the start of the CT scan, But instead of then moving on to the second to 2 degrees, it jumped to 33 degrees or something like that. And you can see that in the graph on the left in detail, where step 1 is at 1 degree, step 2 is at 33, step 3 is at 66, and so on. And you could look at that graph and say, well, wait a minute, you've left gaps in between and you haven't used those. But then you go round again at a slightly different angle, but still with steps of 33 degrees and so on. And if you look at the graph on the right, it shows that as you do more and more steps, you fill in all the gaps. Back in 1980, when I first plotted something like that red line in the graph at the top right, I was doing it laboriously on a hand calculator, 1 point at a time, and plotting the graph, and it slowly emerged as that line with flat tops. And the flat tops match up with the bones in the simple CT phantom on the left of the image, which it's simulating. And those flat tops astonished me. And I still think today that they give some useful insights into what's happening in CT reconstruction. And that's what this slide is about, and also the next slide. They're kind of detailed, and I'm not going to read through every point because you can read faster than me. But if you want to use the pause button, remember where it is. This slide explains some of the insights which I think I can see in that graph. If you want to read the text, now would be a good time to find the pause button on your software. Well, thanks very much for looking at this video. And if you'd like to discuss anything, even that weird graph that I've just shown you, then there's contact details on this slide. Thanks.